Out here, winter on the Great Plains was a sentence. Relentless wind, open ground, nowhere to hide. Modern survival gear means little when sub-zero air sweeps over a frozen prairie for months. Yet whole communities lived and built a system where one wrong move could mean death by dawn. Plains tribes did not survive by being tougher than the cold. They survived with a toolkit of brutal, ingenious tricks, including windbreaking shelters, heat-banking stones, and energy reserves engineered from grass and bone. Each method answered a single question: how to make it until spring. Just how far did survival knowledge have to go to keep a people alive out here? Finding shelter on the open plains was never a matter of luck. Every winter camp began with a careful scan of the horizon, searching for anything that could blunt the wind or catch the sun. The difference between life and death could be measured in a few degrees of warmth, and the right location made all the difference. Natural rock outcrops, riverbanks, and even low rises in the land offered rare protection from the relentless prairie gusts. A well-chosen site could drop the wind chill by dozens of degrees, turning a deadly gale into a manageable cold. Camps were often tucked behind these features, with entrances angled to face the morning sun and away from the harshest winds. This was not just for comfort. Sunlight pouring into a shelter during the day added precious warmth, sometimes raising the interior temperature enough to save fuel and energy. Even the smallest rise or stand of brush could create a microclimate, a pocket where snow drifted less and the ground stayed firmer. These choices were not random. Generations of observation taught which valleys flooded, which slopes iced over, and where animals sheltered from storms. Survival on the plains started before a single pole was set or a fire was lit. It began with reading the land, understanding how wind and sun moved, and claiming the rare spots where winter's grip loosened, if only by a little. On the open plains, shelter alone was not enough. The real challenge was turning a collection of animal hides and wooden poles into a barrier against wind that could freeze exposed skin in minutes. The tip-eye's conical shape did more than create space. It was a feat of environmental engineering. The sloping walls deflected the relentless prairie wind, forcing cold drafts to sweep up and over instead of slamming into the living area. This aerodynamic profile meant the tip-eye stood firm, even as gusts reached speeds that could topple lesser structures. Inside, a second wall made all the difference. The inner liner, hung from the ground up to shoulder height, created a double shell system. Cold air that slipped beneath the outer hides was trapped in this narrow space, forming a layer of still air, nature's insulation. As warm air from the central fire rose, it pressed outward, squeezing cold air down and out through the base gap. This constant exchange kept the living area dry, preventing moisture from collecting and freezing on the hides. The result was a controlled microclimate. Even with temperatures outside dropping well below zero, the interior stayed warm enough for daily life. Smoke flaps at the top could be adjusted to manage airflow, letting out smoke without letting in snow or wind. The combination of the conical design and the double shell liner turned the tipi from a simple tent into a fortress against winter, setting the stage for the next challenge, keeping the cold from seeping up through the frozen ground. Even the best-built shelter could not protect against the cold that seeped up from the ground. On the plains, sleeping directly on frozen earth drained body heat hour after hour, making it nearly impossible to stay warm through the night. To break this cycle, plains tribes relied on ground insulation, an approach as important as walls and roofs. The solution began with layers of natural materials. Thick beds of dried grass, reeds, or cattails were piled across the floor, creating a springy barrier that trapped air and blocked the cold. In some camps, willow branches were woven into mats or platforms, then stacked several inches above the earth. This simple elevation made a profound difference. Air held in the tangled grass or beneath the willow mats acted as insulation. Instead of losing heat to the ground, sleepers rested above a buffer that slowed the transfer of cold. On the coldest nights, extra hides or robes were added on top, further boosting warmth and comfort. This method addressed a basic law of physics. The human body loses heat to anything colder it touches. By lifting bodies away from the frozen ground, these bedding systems preserved core temperature, and reduce the calories needed just to stay alive until morning. The practice was so effective that, even with outdoor temperatures plunging below zero, people could sleep through the night without constant shivering or the risk of hypothermia. Ground insulation was not an afterthought. It was a critical step in turning a shelter from a windbreak into a true refuge. A lesson learned and reapplied each winter, year after year. A fire in the center of a shelter could only do so much. As flames burned low, heat vanished into the cold air, and bodies risked the slow drain of warmth through the night. Plains tribes met this challenge with a solution that required no extra wood, only patience and an understanding of physics. They used stone heat batteries. Large rocks gathered from riverbeds or exposed hillsides were placed in the heart of the fire and left to absorb energy for hours. Once glowing hot, these stones were moved, sometimes with tongs or sticks, into shallow pits dug beneath the shelter floor or arranged around the sleeping area. Even after the fire was allowed to die down, the stones continued to radiate heat, releasing their stored energy slowly through the night. This steady warmth raised the temperature inside the shelter long after the flames had gone out, reducing the need for constant fuel and sparing precious calories that would otherwise be spent gathering wood or buffalo chips. The benefits didn't end with heat. In the dry cold of the plains, skin could crack and lips could bleed from the lack of humidity. Pouring water over heated stones produced steam, adding moisture to the air and protecting against dehydration. The combination of radiant heat and humidity made it possible to sleep through frigid nights without waking shivering or parched. Stones cooled gradually, following a thermal decay curve that matched the body's own need for warmth through the deepest hours before dawn. This method did more than chase away the cold. It aligned with human physiology, conserving energy stores and maintaining skin health when every calorie and drop of moisture counted. Trees were rare across much of the Great Plains, especially in winter, when river groves and shelter belts stood miles apart. With wood scarce, survival depended on fuel that could be gathered in any season. Dried buffalo dung, called chips, became the backbone of prairie fire. After herds passed through, families collected these sun-baked fragments and stacked them near camp for easy access. Unlike green wood, dung chips burned with a steady, even heat. They produced little smoke and left behind glowing embers that could be nurtured long after flames died down. This slow, reliable burn was essential for conserving energy. Instead of venturing out in the dark or cold to search for more fuel, people tended their fires by banking coals and adding chips as needed, sometimes keeping a single fire alive for weeks without letting it go out. Coal, where it could be found, was gathered and used sparingly. Small amounts mixed with dung or grass extended the burn time, stretching limited resources through the longest nights. The careful management of fuel meant fewer trips outside, less exposure to wind and cold, and more calories saved for hunting and daily tasks. On the open plains, even the act of keeping a fire burning was a calculation, balancing what could be gathered against what was needed to survive. Every ember, every chip, was a product of adaptation, transforming the byproducts of the bison into the warmth that made winter bearable. This resourcefulness turned scarcity into security, proving that survival was not about abundance, but about knowing how to use what the land provided. Layered clothing on the plains was more than a matter of comfort. It was a science of survival, refined through generations facing relentless cold. Animal hides, especially buffalo and caribou, formed the foundation. The secret lay in the structure of the materials themselves. Caribou hair, for example, is hollow, trapping air within each strand. Buffalo robes, worn with the fur side in, created thousands of tiny air pockets pressed close to the skin. This trapped air acted as a powerful insulator, slowing the escape of body heat even as the wind howled outside. Clothing was built up in layers, each one adding another barrier against the cold. Underrobes, shirts, and leggings were often lined with plant down or cattail fluff, increasing the insulation without adding weight. Extremities received special care: mittens lined with rabbit fur, moccasins stuffed with dried grass or down, and hoods that covered cheeks and neck. Every exposed inch risked frostbite, So, garments extended over wrists and ankles to seal in warmth where blood vessels ran close to the surface. By relying on these layered systems, people could conserve precious body heat and reduce their dependence on fire. The effectiveness of these materials was not accidental. It was the result of close observation and adaptation to the demands of the plains. Each hide, each layer, was chosen for its ability to trap air and shield the body, turning clothing into a portable microclimate in a world where the cold never relented. Preserving enough energy to survive the plains' winter depended on more than hunting skill or luck. It required a way to bank calories for months, long after fresh game vanished from the horizon. Pemmican became the answer, a high-density food engineered for storage and mobility. The process began with lean strips of bison or elk meat, dried until they snapped, then pounded into a fine powder. Fat rendered from bone marrow or back fat was melted down and mixed in equal parts with the powdered meat, a balance that prevented protein poisoning and maximized energy. Sometimes dried berries were added for flavor and nutrients. The finished mixture was packed tightly into rawhide bags, then sealed to keep out air and moisture. When made correctly, pemmican could last through an entire season, even in fluctuating temperatures. Each bag, weighing up to 90 pounds, represented weeks of survival, enough to feed a family or fuel a hunting party on the move. The airtight seal and high-fat content slowed spoilage, turning pemmican into a portable reserve that did not freeze solid or rot. When winter closed in and hunting failed, and stored crops ran low, these reserves bridged the gap between scarcity and survival. They allowed people to travel, hunt, and endure when the land offered nothing but cold and wind. The combination of concentrated calories, stable storage, and portability aligned with human biological limits, providing the energy needed to maintain body heat and bodily function without constant access to fresh food. In practical terms, pemmican was not a delicacy, it was a lifeline. Travel across the winter plains demanded more than strength. It required knowing how to move without wasting precious energy. Instead of fighting through waist-deep drifts or slogging over rough ground, plains hunters and families followed routes shaped by the land and the wind. Frozen rivers became winter highways. Their flat, open surfaces offered miles of level travel, free from the tangled grass and hidden holes that slowed movement in other seasons. When the ice was thick enough to hold the weight of sleds, dogs, and heavy loads of meat or hides, entire camps could relocate in a single day, covering distances that would have been impossible through deep snow. Windswept ridges offered another advantage. Constant prairie winds swept these high points almost bare, stripping away snow and exposing firm ground beneath. Travelers could walk for miles along these ridges without sinking or tiring, conserving the calories needed to stay warm and alert. Even warriors on scouting missions chose these paths, moving quickly and leaving few tracks behind. Every journey was a calculation. Moving along rivers and ridges meant faster travel, less exposure to wind, and lower risk of exhaustion or hypothermia. In a world where every step cost energy, the smartest route was the one that demanded the least. These pathways formed the backbone of winter survival networks, connecting camps, hunting grounds, and trade partners across a frozen landscape where a wrong turn could mean being stranded far from shelter. When movement was no longer possible, when whiteout winds erased all sense of direction and the nearest camp lay miles away, survival depended on what could be built from the very substance of winter itself. Plains travelers caught in sudden storms sometimes turned to emergency snow shelters, using compacted drifts as both wall and roof. Snow, though cold to the touch, holds air within its crystals. When packed and shaped into domes or dug into trenches, it acts as a barrier, blocking wind that would otherwise strip body heat in minutes. The process was straightforward but demanded urgency. Snow was piled, or found already drifted deep, then stamped down and allowed to settle. A shallow trench could be scooped out, lined with conifer boughs if available, and covered with more snow or hides. The result, even in the open, was dramatic. Inside, temperatures could rise by as much as 20 degrees Fahrenheit above the outside air, a margin that could mean the difference between hypothermia and survival. These shelters were not meant for comfort or long-term use. They bought time, offering a window of warmth and protection until the storm passed or help arrived. The knowledge to build them came from years of watching snow behavior, from understanding that even in a world of ice, insulation was possible. In the harshest moments, the land itself became the last defense against the cold. No single trick could guarantee survival through a plains winter. Every method depended on the others, but it was the collective effort that truly tipped the balance. Inside a shared shelter, warmth was not just a matter of fire or fur, but of bodies gathered together. Multiple families slept side by side, pooling their body heat, so that even the coldest nights felt less forbidding. The number of people in a dwelling directly cut the amount of fuel each person needed. One fire could serve many, and the heat lingered longer when shared among a group. This communal living extended far beyond the walls of the shelter. Duties rotated. Someone always watched the fire, adding chips or heated stones through the darkest hours, while others prepared food or checked on the youngest and oldest members. These overnight fire tenders, often staying awake in shifts, made sure embers never faded, preventing a dangerous chill from creeping in before dawn. Food, clothing, and even bedding were distributed according to need, not ownership. If a hunter brought in extra meat, it was portioned out for the entire camp. When a child shivered, someone found an extra robe. The system worked because everyone relied on everyone else. In the end, it was this web of cooperation, woven from countless shared tasks and quiet acts of care, that allowed Plains people to endure winters that would have overwhelmed any one person alone. Today, central heating and insulated walls shield us from cold, but they also insulate us from the knowledge that once meant survival. The ability to read landscape, share resources, and plan for scarcity built resilience, and those skills are now fading as comfort replaces necessity. In a world facing rising energy insecurity, the old lessons remain. Survival depends less on what we endure and more on what we understand together. Thanks for watching.